All right, Brian.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Walsh, co-founder of Exerceo. Joining me here is Julio Valcarcel.
Just today, you're Brian Walsh?
Yep,
Not
just
every
today,
day?
man. Just today.
You still need
There's
some more of that
days you don't
coffee.
There's days you don't want to be. I'll talk briefly about Exerceo real quick. So Exerceo exists to lead and inspire others to transform society by extending relevant learning and mentorship into everyday lifestyle. And so that's kind of the motto. But what does that really mean to everybody here? So basically, Exerceo exists to help rising professionals successfully enter the workforce and rise within the workforce. And that translates to the working groups. And I'll make a shameless plug. We have a Rising Professional Challenge series, a Rising Leaders series, and a Rising Entrepreneurs series on the website that people can do offline at their own pace to help grow their skills. We don't cover most of that. I'll say communications today's topic is the only topic that we cover in the Rising Professional Challenge series as well. And we'll get into that later about that. So those are some of the other resources. Feel free to, as always, feel free to invite others to the working groups, send them any of the Exerceo content. We welcome sharing that for others to learn as a nonprofit. And as always, like and share all of our posts on social media to help further our cause. We'd appreciate that. Jump right in. Go ahead.
Yeah, Pat here in a second is going to drop into the chat the attendance for today. So if you could go ahead and fill that out, that lets us know that you are here, and it lets us know who to send the notes for today to. So you don't have to be scribbling down any notes or anything. So.
Yeah, in addition to, if you save the link, you can watch this over and over again. I don't know if you want to do that, but we also have a series of notes we send out, so you can have a reference if you want a quick reference too. So we'll launch into today's topics, or communication and mentorship. Passionate about both of those topics, a little biased on the mentorship side, but communication is one of the most important aspects of having a successful career. It's also one of the most challenging aspects, right? You can have the same conversation with multiple people and get different results. You could even have the same conversation with the same person on different days and different times of the day and get different results. And all of that's based on our communication. So on the bright side, it's something we can always work on to improve every day. On the flip side, a lot of typical software developers are very engineering and math focused. We like 1 + 1 = 2 every time, and communication does not fit that build. So this is one of those things that we tend to struggle with on that side, but it is an opportunity. And I will consistently fall back on, I don't know if you see this, Julio, but if you look back on most of the problems we face on a daily basis aren't 1 + 1 didn't equal 2. It's a failure in communication in some way, shape, or form.
That is definitely one of the leading reasons. If you do a root cause analysis of most problems in the workplace, it ends up coming
even
down
at
to
home. Last night my wife was like, "Oh, well, you didn't tell me. I didn't know." Right? It just
communication.
Fail
Communication
right
is
there.
if you're not able to express what it is you're having a challenge with, or what you're trying to achieve to someone else, then it's going to lead to problems in all sorts of other areas. So it's why we talk about this as its own module here today, as well as the challenge series.
Yeah, I mean, as Julio knows, when we set stuff up, I'm like, put it on my calendar. That's my go-to communication mechanism, so I don't miss things, because I know I forget. Right, I'll walk around with sticky notes in the office, and people are like, "You just wrote that down." I'm like, because I'll forget before I get back to my to-do list.
I have the same problem. I have to write it down or put it in my notes or my to-do list. If it's not written down, I'm liable to forget in the next 5 seconds.
I've left the house, honest truth, and walked up the driveway to get the mail because my wife asked me to. Got distracted on my phone. You might be shocked by that. I have a long driveway. Got to the end of the driveway and was like, I don't remember what I was doing, so I went home. And she's like, "Where's the mail?" I was like, "Oh."
So we actually have a really good question here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your name. Just Kieran. If communication is so important, why don't people make more effort to communicate? That's a fantastic question, and it's because it has to be intentional. I mean, good communication is intentional. You have to be explicit and think about, I think one of the best books for this is How to Win Friends and Influence Others by Dale Carnegie. And it talks about, communication is how you win friends and influence people as you go through the book. And and they're all very intentional things you have to do. You have to consider where the other person's coming from, what their background is, what they're trying to say, making sure that you're being heard. So it's just talking is not communicating. Just spewing words out to someone else is not communication. It's the other person has to understand and hear what you're saying.
Well, I think, hopefully by the end of the lecture today, we've answered this question a little bit, but we can get into it a little bit more. I think there's a lot of points that I hope we're going to bring up today that will answer that question in a variety of ways, because the other thing we tend to see is people either think they're communicating, right? And we'll talk through that today, or they don't want to have the hard conversations. So, and we'll get into that a little bit today and why those are all important aspects. So we can jump right into our first topic, which we call the ideal worker. And what we try to talk about is, what's your ideal coworker? And if you guys want to have some fun, start typing in the chat some of the characteristics of the coworker you want to work with. And Julio and I will kind of go back and forth on the most common ones that we hear people say, but it'll be neat to see what is in the chat. There's a little lag for us here. So what's your ideal?
Honest.
I think one of mine is positive. Like, I really like people that are upbeat and positive.
Yeah, you don't ever want to work with a person who's just comes in and grouchy all day. Oh man, it's been a while since you've made me go through these.
Yeah. So the other common one is people always say is people that are on time. I'm horrible about that, so I confess.
That is definitely. I'm just making notes in here. So
the positivity on time. A lot of people use the word smart or intelligent. I prefer the word hardworking because I feel like
I think problem solver sort of goes into that. Again, it's positivity as well. You don't want to work with a person who's just going to give up on the first try. You want to. David in chat said positive, hard worker.
Active listener. I like that. Yep.
That is definitely.
And there's an art to active listening.
Yes.
Especially in the virtual world. And Matt, we see your question. We'll address that.
Brian, do you have Teams up? I'm going to send you the chat so you can pull it up on your computer here.
Oh, sweet.
Sorry. So Alexander, my ideal coworker is the kind of person who can feel comfortable asking for help and allow me to ask them for help in turn. Compassion and understanding. Someone who steps outside of their own shoes and their own perspectives. And again, it comes back to the communication and seeking to understand.
And I think, and so we'll jump forward a little bit, is where we're heading with this is all these characteristics we call the ideal worker. And if you want to work with people that have these characteristics, you're going to be shocked, but they want to work with people that have these characteristics. So you have to portray the same characteristics that you want to work with. And what you'll find is these groups attract the same people. And so ideal workers want to work with other ideal workers. And so you have to have these same characteristics if you want to work with them. And, let's say, if we pull 10 of the characteristics, right? If you have 8 of the 10 and you work on the others, that's fine. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect. Let's, be fair and reasonable. But you can't diverge greatly. Positivity is probably a really big one. If you're all the others but negative all the time, that's probably going to outweigh some of them. Some of them will outweigh the others, but you have to work on that and being that. And so it sounds so obvious when we say it now. People are like, oh yeah, that's really obvious, right? But when I have this conversation with a lot of people, they're like, oh, I never thought about that, right? We start walking through, what's going on in the work environment. And the other thing that I'm going to point out too is, you could be that driving factor, right? Let's say everybody else is having a bad day. If you come in, you smile, you greet people, all of a sudden you could start lifting everybody's morale. You could be that change agent. If people are late for meetings and you're on time, they're going to, especially as a leader, they kind of tend to follow your example, right? And so they're going to do what you do. So if you can set the example, they're going to follow and move to that. So being that ideal worker, that change momentum can be critical.
Yep. Yeah, and in the comments here, another good one is humble, or at least the willingness to put aside your own ego and know that you can make mistakes and have your own problems. That's definitely a common theme too. I think a lot of our classes and things we'll talk about is the willingness to ask for help and admit when you know you're wrong. And it's not really that you know you're wrong, but just asking for help and saying, hey, I don't know how to solve this.
I think being open to being wrong is a first point.
Open to feedback is definitely the first step, is just willing to take some of that. I'm not going to say criticism, but feedback on.
So a shameless plug. There's the thanks for the feedback in the Rising Professional Challenge series or Rising Leaders Challenge series. Feedback is a huge part of growth. And I put in the Leaders Challenge series because I feel like, the Rising Professionals, people just entering. But as you really grow within the workforce, feedback is extremely critical to your growth and being open to it. And how you receive feedback encourages people to give you feedback. If you don't receive feedback well, people aren't going to want to give it. And it's, I know that's a really key thing in our environment. Julio and I do a really good job at that.
Yeah. If you're not open to feedback as you grow, and as you're working in the workforce, you're going to end up having to learn all the lessons the hard way. You're not going to be able to go and get that mentorship. And that's kind of key, and we'll talk probably more about this in the next part of the class here today, is being open to that feedback allows you to grow and learn from other people's mistakes in a much more iterative and fast-paced environment. So that way you can quickly evaluate what you just did, understand if it worked or not, and continue to improve upon that.
All right, so we'll move on to the next topic, the variety of communication, so communication styles. And so this is, COVID has kind of, hurt us in this aspect because a lot of people used to communicate in person, and now we're kind of being forced not to communicate in person. But along the similar lines, if you want to start typing in chat the communication style that you prefer, some of the things that we see a lot of times are, in person, face to face, email, text messaging, chat.
Chat. And I'm just going to sort of blanket all the different chat ways that you can do instant messaging, whether it be
this into a religious
Hangouts, Slack, Discord, all the different types that are out there. IRC, if you still use that.
Yeah.
So any sort of text-based communication that's an IM of some sort.
Like the days of faxes are gone, like early on, nobody sends letters anymore, do they? Right? U.S. mail. Does it ever arrive?
I occasionally hear the fax machine here go off. Someone trying to send us something.
I hate that thing.
This is definitely something that at the beginning of COVID, as people started to work remote, you start to realize what your preferred communication style is, because you start to realize that, hey, some people don't respond well to, hey, a video call or an IM on whatever chat service you're using. Me personally, I love in-person conversations, or at least voice conversations. So where I can either see the other person, that's definitely my preference. So to me, video calls versus in-person are pretty equal. I always prefer in-person, just because you can see someone's full mannerisms and things like that. But video call is a fantastic substitute for that, especially when you're collaborating with people that aren't physically nearby, either across the country or across the world. Second to that for me is going to be phone call. Again, you start to understand and hear the person's inflection and tone and things like that. And to me, that's really important. I can understand whether they're angry about something or not understanding something I said. Again, we already brought it up here earlier, is active listening, hearing what they're saying and how they're saying it. And then all the other types are, to me, email, text, IM are kind of all the same.
And so I think the point that we want people to understand here is everybody has a preferred mechanism of communication. And when you want to reach somebody, you have to kind of switch to their preferred, not yours. It's great when they line up. Like if, Julio and I both like to email, that's going to work really well. If he doesn't like to email and I like to email and I keep hitting him on email and wonder why he's not responding, it's a fail on my part. I have to figure out what he likes and I have to use his communication mechanism. I have to use video chat or text or whatever it is that he likes to be able to reach him. And oftentimes when I figure out what people like, in my comments field, in my contacts, I'll put their preferred communication style so that I know in the future how to get a hold of them. I've tried to get a hold of people via email, call, and no luck, right? But then I text them.
There's some known culprits. I know who you're thinking of.
Yeah, and then I'll text them and they respond right back.
Yeah.
Right.
You'll send them an email, 6 months will go by, never get a response, but you text them and it's immediate. Any time of the day, it's immediate. But all the other, I have Outlook installed, but I don't like opening up Outlook. Like some things, sometimes it's as dumb as that. Like, I just don't like using that app, so I just don't respond.
It's as simple as my wife, my kids will tell me, she'll see me call and she'll just put her phone down, right? But then I'll text and she'll respond right away. I mean, I'm not dumb. Like, I know you have your phone. If you respond to text, you clearly saw the call, right? And so, I mean, people figure that stuff out. So the point here is use the communication style that people like so you'll get the responses you want. And that's where, early on, remember the question came up about, why don't people communicate? A lot of times people think they're communicating. I could send Julio an email and I feel like I've communicated with him. But if I'm not communicating with his method, he may either not receive it or it may not be a way that he can keep it organized and respond to it. One of the reasons I like email personally is because I can go in and Gmail and I can star it so I can come back to it. Right? I hate text messages because there's no way for me to like star it and come back to it, right? And prioritize, I really need to respond to Julio. Let me star this and get back to him, right? In text messages, there's no way for me to do that. And so I struggle when people send me a text message to respond to them. Versus an email is easier for me to remember that. I
think one good subtlety to note here too, and David mentioned here in chat, that email can be frustrating waiting for a response. And I totally agree. If there's something I'm working on that I need to I'm blocked by this other person, I'm going to go and use a different mechanism to get in touch with them. But for some people like Brian, I know if I don't need something immediately from him, the best way to get a message, get something back from him isn't going to be IM. He doesn't look at that. I know that. It's going to be email because he'll go and prioritize it, just like he was just saying. So sometimes you get to meet the person where they're at and also understand the priority of whatever it is you're looking for. Picking up the phone, you'd be shocked the number of times we've just told an engineer that, hey, have you even tried calling the person to solve the problem? Oh, wait, I should call them? You're like, yeah. Do that? It's like, yes, just pick up the phone and talk to the person. It will solve the problem a lot quicker, especially if you have a chain going back and forth over email. We had a customer reach out to us a few weeks ago now, and they were like, we lost data in our production server, and I don't know what happened, and you guys made changes the week before. The tone was, I'm not going to say confrontational, but it wasn't happy. I knew that much. I was like, here, hold on. Let's just set up a call real quick and let me talk with you about it. And I got on the phone and they were super happy. Like, hey, thank you for all your help last week. Like, can you just help me figure this out? I don't know what happened. And the whole tone of it could have easily gone off the rails and quickly gone into very combative and mean back and forth email based off the initial tone. But just getting on the call just solved hey, no, that's not at all. They just typed it up really quickly probably and just didn't think about what their tone was coming across on it. Yeah,
and I'll say, lesson learned, if there's any remote way someone's going to take something negative out of a conversation or a communication, I prefer to do it in person. In the COVID days, you at least a video chat, so you can read their body language and you can get in front of it. I know I've sent a few emails in my life that the response is like, what do you mean? And I see that the person took it in a very negative way and I didn't even, to be honest, see it coming. And that's when you're immediately, I'm trying to dial their number to solve the problem. I've lit a fire I didn't even see coming.
The worst thing you do is you start the fire and you're trying to get a hold of them. You just start seeing the messages come in from them. What do you mean? That's not that's not how we should be doing it.
400 chats coming in a minute. I'm like, oh God.
And you see the little dot of them typing.
Yeah, I've really upset somebody. And along the same lines, right? The other day at work, they always come to me and say, well, Brian, it's amazing you solve all these problems, right? I really don't do anything that's super hard. A lot of times it's just communication. And I'll, the engineers will come to me, Brian, we can't get a hold of so-and-so. And I'll be like, well, what did you do? They're like, well, I emailed them. And like you said, Julio, I was like, did you call them? Well, I tried, but I couldn't get a hold of them. Well, what I'll do is I'll stalk them on their chat, right? Because chat will
See if
show
they're
people green,
Yeah.
right? And I've learned, like Christina at work, she goes yellow when she's green. So like I've learned. So I'll go in and I'll be like, oh, look, that person's green, or they went from offline to online, and I'll hit them right up with a quick, hey, you got a second, And then, because a lot of people, they'll respond quickly, if you can just hit them up real quick with what you need.
That's how I know where to reach you at is I can see which chat is green, since we use a couple different services. If I saw an email recently, and then I figure out what phone number to call, if it's his desk phone or his mobile phone. So
yeah, I often get in my car, my phone is ringing. I'm like, oh, okay.
95% of the time, it's probably me.
Yeah, you were Scott. So just meet people on the method of communication. So I think we've beat that horse down now. So we'll switch over to one of my favorite sayings is problems are opportunities.
Yes.
And people, if you're around me a lot, you're going to get tired of hearing that. I say it all the time, and it's trying to change people's approach in life. Not to be happy that there's problems, but they are opportunities. And instead of being humdrum and down about it, try to figure out how to turn it into something positive. You'll be surprised. A lot of our, best work has come out of problems, right? We'll have a customer problem. I'll have to go have a hard conversation. And it's how we handle those problems that provide us the future opportunities. And so it can differentiate us in a positive or a negative light. And I'll talk through, I got two examples here. I'll go through both a personal example and a professional example. And why do I go through a personal example is because I want you to see that your problems or opportunities can help you in your personal life and your professional life. Because a lot of things we do here, communications, that can help you everywhere in life, right? It can help you personal, professional, family. You'll be shocked at how many things it can help with. So for some reason, all my opportunities seem to happen around 7 a.m. in the morning. I don't know why. But so my first example, I was sitting in my office, phone rang about 7 a.m., and it was our nanny. And she said, hey, Brian, there's water all over the basement in the unfinished area. And I'm like, okay, where's it coming from is your natural question. She goes, it's coming from one of those holes in the floor. And for those of you that don't own a home, oftentimes sump pumps are where there's a hole in the floor and water comes out of them. And they're designed to pump the water out. But when they fail, obviously they're not pumping the water out. So water can be quickly a homeowner's nightmare. If you don't believe it, ask any homeowner if they've ever had water problems and see if they shrivel up in a ball and crawl under their desk. So anyway, after this conversation with her, we couldn't determine what the cause was. So I decided that I was going to have to get up and leave work and drive home and see if I could solve this problem, right? Because we couldn't communicate, right? And this is before, it was a few years ago, so it was before kind of video calls would have made this a lot easier back in those days. If she could have pulled up the video, I would have seen it. So I get home and I get downstairs and I look and I can immediately tell it's the water return that we use at home, and it's for the bathroom in the basement. And so I go in the bathroom in the basement. I notice that the toilet is set in a continuous mode. And so the lady cleaning our house had set the toilet up to rinse it out and clean it and forgotten about it. And the water system can only keep up with a few flushes. It's not designed for continuous. And so, if you ever have water running on the floor, when you have 300 or 400 gallons, a few extra gallons is not noticeable. So don't panic. I was like, okay, I see an opportunity here. And so I kind of walked upstairs, grabbed the cleaning lady and said, hey, I don't understand what's going on in the basement. There's water on the floor. Can you help me out? And she goes downstairs and notices that the toilet's in continuous mode, turns it off. And she says, is there anything I can do to help? And so, here's the opportunities, right? Obviously, very upset that there's water on the floor. The cause is fairly clear. Now, most people's initial reaction to these problems are to yell at people and get upset with people, right? And that makes us generally feel good when we yell at somebody, but it generally doesn't make them feel good, right? I have never met somebody that likes to be yelled at, okay? So it's not going to help us get what we want, right? So I'm going to challenge you with problems or opportunities. Start thinking about what do you want? Now, what's your road to getting that, okay? How do you turn this problem into an opportunity? So what I want at this moment is not to have to clean up the water. I prefer to not have to deal with the problem. There's a little backstory to this too, by the way. When I did get home, I hope my wife never watches this. The nanny had taken my wife's like 4,000 thread count white towels and thrown them on the basement floor to clean up this water, which happened to be from the septic toilet system. So if my wife ever found out that her, cashmere towels or whatever, these like crazy thread count soft white towels were on the basement floor with toilet water, she would immediately throw them out and buy new ones. And for some reason, these towels must be made of gold because they're really expensive, and I don't understand it. And God bless the nanny. I'm not upset with her for grabbing those towels and using them. There is a stack of old towels right there in the basement, but she doesn't know that. So she went upstairs and grabbed the first towel she could find to try to help stop the water. So thank you for trying to help. But yeah, so that was one of my other things I noticed when I went home. And so when the cleaning lady asked how she could help, I said, well, can you help clean up the water? And she said, well, how do I do that? I said, well, I have a shop vac. So I went out in the garage, brought a shop vac down. I'm very adept at cleaning up water. And she said, okay, I'll help with this. And she said, is there anything else I can do? I said, well, can we get my wife's nice white towels? Can we wash those and return them upstairs and never speak of that incident to my wife again? And she says, yes, I can do that. Right. And so approaching this with the, hey, here's what I want, right, and asking for the help, now she's going, and I left work and I solved that problem, right? I came home that night, those crazy, ridiculous towels were back, washed, cleaned, cleaner than ever. Nobody ever knew the difference, right? Now, here's a side effect, right? Two things happen, right? Now, if I gotten upset, I could have fired the cleaning lady, right, and yelled at her, and that wouldn't have been very effective. And let's say I didn't even fire her. Let's say I just yelled at her. You think that's going to motivate her to do a good job in the future? No, right? She's going to be like, I hate that jerk. He yells at me, right? And if I fired her, now I have a second problem. I have to find a new cleaning lady. So, problems can be compounded here, right? Now I've got to, clean up the mess in my basement, find a new cleaning lady, right? Now I've got more problems than I started the day with. But if I turn it into the opportunity and handle it the way I did, now the basement's been cleaned. The side effect was, have you ever left a pot on the stove, it boiled over, and maybe had a problem? For like a week, every time you leave the kitchen, you have to go back and check, right? You're like, oh, did I leave the stove on? Right? Well, same thing with the cleaning lady. I am sure now that for like the next probably month, every time she cleaned that basement bathroom, she would be upstairs and she would probably freak out, run down the stairs and check to make sure it still wasn't running, right? So we weren't going to have the same problem, I'm sure. And then there was an additional weird side effect. My wife kept commenting, wow, for the couple weeks after, she's like, the house is really extra clean lately. The cleaning lady's doing a really good job. As she felt bad, so she was putting more time and energy into cleaning the house. And so the house was actually extra clean because of how we handled that problem. We turned it into an opportunity, and we got these additional benefits out of it, and it created a better relationship for us. And so if you approach problems at home differently, you're going to get different results. And I'll implore you, don't look for problems today. They will find you. Don't worry. Don't rush to problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the problems will always come.
You don't need to create them.
Yeah.
But think, okay, when you have a problem today, tomorrow, what's the best outcome you could have with that problem? Now, how do you get there? And have your response tailored to get there. And ask for the help. Tell people what you need. Move it forward in a different way. You'll be shocked at the way people respond. They're like, whoa.
One of the first things that I like to do when encountering a problem and trying to understand, every problem, like Brian said, is an opportunity. I firmly believe that. One of the first things I go when I do is I look at, okay, well, what did I not do? In most cases, in that example that Brian gave, it's going to be some sort of communication. Brian probably could have, if he knew that was a possibility of a problem, he could have told the cleaning person to, hey, don't leave it on continuous run mode, and educated her before. So there are things Brian could have done in advance. So it's not her fault. It's just, it is what it is. And so it's how you respond to it that really makes the big difference.
Yeah, and so I'll move on to the second example, the professional example. And this one's kind of still near and dear to me. It's kind of still in my life in a weird way. So again, it's 7 a.m. at work. I don't understand. I'm sitting at my desk, and one of our young ladies comes over to me, visibly upset, tears in her eyes, and she says she's deleted our production database. So I told her to sit down, and I shifted my computer and I go look, and sure enough, she's deleted the production database. And to be fair, her task was to go clean up some of the unused databases on the production server. And so there's a graphical user interface, and it asks, are you sure? And you have to click yes. I'm sure everybody's aware of those things. But all of us have trained ourselves, like what to do immediately. Like nobody stops and thinks about the yes, right? They just delete, yes, confirm. We don't ever really use that extra confirmation to slow us down, right? And so I verified that she deleted the database. And I looked at her, I said, all right, what I need you to do is go sit in the conference room, just relax, but don't tell anybody what's happened. Let me handle the situation. Give me a few minutes to think about the problem, think about the solution, and work through it, okay, and message it. And so I immediately call my boss and I say, boss, I'd like to exercise our, backup and recovery scripts for the production database. We haven't done that in a while. And my boss, trusts me a lot. And so she goes, okay, sure. And she had that puzzled kind of like, I trust you. I don't know why you're doing this, but I've got too many other things to focus on this morning. So she said, go off and do this, right? And so we have a new system administrator who started like that week. So I go to him. I'm like, hey, I need you to run this recovery for this database in production. And thankfully, prior to making this assignment, I went and made a backup of the production server because a risk reward, I was, hey, something could go wrong when we do this. Let's make sure. So I verified the production backup. I copied it to a place for the system administrator, and I asked him to go restore it. And so he goes and restores it and comes back to me and says, hey, we're missing these files to do the restore. I was like, oh, interesting. So I went and looked, and luckily we had backed those up somewhere else. So we found those files, and long story short, we were able to restore the production database. And so I go call the young lady back into my office, and I tell her that we've restored the production database, okay? And nobody but myself and Steve, the system administrator, knew. I sent out an email to the team telling them we're going to do this exercise, so they just think we did an exercise. And the backstory here is this is somebody I've been trying to fire for a long time, for just not doing their job. As a software developer, they weren't doing a good job as a software developer. So lo and behold, she goes, are you going to fire me for this? I said, I'm not going to fire you for this. She says, but you've been trying to fire me. And so this sparked a conversation. It was an opportunity. The two of us were sitting in my office. I said, well, let's have an open conversation. I'm not trying to fire you for doing your job. I'm trying to fire you because I don't feel like you're doing a good job as a software engineer. You're not completing tasks. I said, you're really good at these other things that aren't software engineering, but you're not a good software engineer, and we need someone as a software engineer on our team. So we had a very open conversation. She goes, oh, I thought you just didn't like me, so you're trying to fire me. I'm like, no. And so we had this conversation. And lo and behold, she goes and tells a few people. So my tech lead comes in, he says, so Brian, you're gonna fire her. You finally have a really good cause to fire her. I told my tech lead, I said, no, we can't fire her for this. We don't fire people for trying and failing. And I said, if I fired her for making a mistake, then I'd have to fire the next person that makes a mistake. And I don't want to create that culture. We don't want to send that message to the team. It's the wrong message to send. And so he's like, okay, yeah, I understand that. Good. And so part of this is setting the tone. Well, lo and behold, about a week later, she comes to my office. She says, I really appreciate our conversation. I've decided to resign. I'm taking a new job. Our conversation really hit home, and I think you're right. I'm not good at a software engineer, so I've decided to resign and take a new job in project management. And so she actually transitioned to being a contractor and moved to work for the government, and she became a program manager for the government. And lo and behold, she became my program manager. So she went from working for me to being my boss, my immediate boss, and right away. So it was very interesting. So she became my boss, and everybody on the team was like, oh, Brian, you're getting fired, right? Because it was very well known that I had tried to fire her and it didn't work. And so we would laugh and joke about this between the two of us, but it became a very good relationship going forward because we developed that honest and open communication. And so we would laugh and joke about firing each other in meetings going forward. And we have a great relationship to this day because of how we handled the problem, and we set that tone and that environment for the team. Instead of getting upset and taking advantage of it, we handled it in a way that messaged the team how we want to handle these situations and to create a better relationship with this person. So It's an example in a professional environment where creating that open and honest communication and handling a problem in a different way can actually solve many problems and create a better path forward for things. And ironically, I still see this person a lot. I saw her
It's
at
a small
a meeting.
world. It's a small world.
Because she's no longer my program manager, but I saw her at a meeting pre-COVID. She ran over, gave me a hug. We chatted for a few minutes, and we're still actually really good friends to this day because of that relationship we formed and that bond and that, that crisis.
So moving on from that and talking about, problems are always opportunities. And I think it's one of the core things that if you look at every problem that you encounter in both, again, like your professional or personal life, you can always make something better out of it. Whether it be a learning opportunity for you for, hey, I should have realized this before it became a problem, or addressed it beforehand, and it's a learning moment for yourself, or a way to bridge a relationship or solve a problem in a unique and different way. There's always, if you step back, avoid the knee-jerk reaction of just responding immediately to the problem. That's the first thing you don't want to do. In all these cases,
often your first response is the worst one.
Exactly. You want to just step back, just take a breath and say, all right, what could I have done differently, or how can I turn this into an opportunity? There's always a different perspective that you can take to any sort of challenge that you encounter.
Yeah, there's a comment in there. You never know people's positions. I don't remember the book, but there's a really good book that I read, and it said, treat everybody like the CEO, including the cleaning people, everybody in the company.
It's one of the books we listen to. I just don't remember.
I love that phrase because I think it's true. And it's more about just respect, right? Treat everybody with the same respect. All right, so problems are opportunities. I say it one more time, drill it through to people.
It won't be the last time you hear us say it.
And my challenge for you between the next time we see you guys, here on the live stream is go just try approaching one problem differently. Like Julio said, pull back, whatever your first response is, just count to 10.
Yep.
Say, Brian wouldn't want me to do this.
How is this an
Julio
opportunity?
wouldn't recommend this, right? Think of Julio sitting on your shoulders. Don't do that. No. How do I get what I want, right? And start, and then map forward how you get what you want. And, you probably won't be the best at it at first, right? But then refine that skill. I've gotten better and better at it. Like I wasn't really good at this at first, and I've gotten better and better. And honestly, as you move up in the leadership chain, these opportunities tend to arise on a daily basis. So you get better by being exposed to them more often.
Yes.
I feel like almost everything I encounter now is an opportunity on the daily basis. So I've gotten better at it. And some of them don't even feel like opportunities anymore because they become just human nature. So we'll move on. Empowerment is kind of our next communication advice and really approach.
Tool in the toolbox, if you will.
Yeah, I like that. The how we communicate with people can leave them empowered or leave them disenfranchised, or better stated, they will walk away from the conversation trying to help or walk away not wanting to help, right? Mm-hmm. And, if we think of the problems or opportunities, we need them walking away trying to help, or that's our goal, right? If they walk away not wanting to help, who failed? It's not them, it's us. We failed. And so we have to learn how to empower people when we communicate with them.
A really great example of this is in software development. If you have a short turnaround deadline, if we have a customer, they say, hey, we need this bug fixed, or we need this feature implemented, and it's for a customer, and we need it by the end of next week.
Next week, tomorrow.
Yeah, we're never that lucky.
Yesterday is usually the answer.
Yeah. Let's say they need it in 2 weeks. So as a project manager or a lead on your team, you go and you talk to one of the engineers and you say, hey, the customer's asked for this thing. It's a really high priority, and I need your help doing it today. But let me know if you can't get it done by the end of the week, and I'll step in and I'll finish it next week. That ends up taking an approach that you're telling the person that it's okay for them to fail, and that you're just expecting them to fail, and you're going to pick up the pieces for them afterwards.
They probably went back to their desk and got on their fantasy football league, or what is it, March Madness now. They're filling out their bracket all week, and they know you're going to do it the following week.
The simple difference, though, to really empower the individual is you're leaving off the fact that you're going to pick it up at the end and say, hey, I really need your help with this. Can you go and help me get this done? Let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
Well, and even impart confidence on them.
Yeah.
Hey, this is a tough problem. Stage it, right? People like a challenge. Julio, I know this is a tough problem, but I know you can solve this, Julio. I'm confident in you.
Yep.
Right. We have 2 weeks to really solve this. And let me know what you need. Open the door for that reverse communication.
Yep.
Right. Is my biggest, frustration as a manager is when people fail and they don't tell me ahead of time. We have a lot of students coming through the working groups. I hear a lot of students that come to me at the end of the semester and they're like, you know what, Brian, I failed. Pick your favorite class.
Data structures.
Yeah, I failed data
algorithms.
Structures. I failed differential equations, right? That was always my tough class, right? Yeah. I failed it. And I get so just inside ragingly mad. And why? Is because if they had just come to us halfway through the semester, a quarter of the way through the semester, and said they were struggling, we've got 10 engineers here in the office that have taken that same class last year, right? We'll get them help, right? The help is literally right here. And it frustrates me that we just didn't know we needed to help them.
Yep.
And so, open that door when somebody leaves to come back and ask for help, because it's usually often easy. Now, on the same vein, right, if you're giving somebody an easy task, don't say it's hard. Tell them, hey, this is really easy. Give them context so that if they're like struggling, they know to come back, right? Give them a context. Hey, this is an easy task. Shouldn't take you more than an hour. Let me know if you're struggling. That way they can, if they're an hour into it, they might be missing something obvious, right?
Yeah. I typically do this by saying something along the lines of like, hey, I think this should take an hour or two, but I don't know, maybe there's something else to it. So let me know if you don't get it by then. And that empowers them to just reach out for help, but also to go and work on it on their own. So if they do run into a roadblock, as a manager, it's your job to time box and make sure that things aren't, because you have to manage customer expectations. But you don't want your team just to go and take a task and go run with it and then just fail after right up to the deadline. So you want them to empower them to be successful, but you also want to make sure that you're opening the door to communication back.
Yeah, and if you ever, oftentimes, people on the outside can see the failure coming. So if you see a failure coming, don't stand by and watch. Right? Your obligation is to step in and help. And help doesn't necessarily mean pointing it out. My favorite approach to helping is just asking questions that lead them to recognize the problem. Because the more they can recognize it, the more they're going to feel empowered to fix it. And then they're going to have buy-in to that.
So I'm looking to see in our notes here, Brian. I think we covered both the cases here for empowerment. So this next sort of tool to really talk about is, and we've already mentioned this in some of these past examples, is just being honest. Being honest in your expectations, being honest in what the problem is, just honesty in communication just causes a lot less problems down the road. It might not be easy to be honest at first, especially if even if that honesty is giving someone feedback. We've had individuals come through the working groups and really, really put their heart and soul into it, but they just weren't, the way that they approached problem solving wasn't an approach that is really suitable to long-term success in software development. We said, we've given those people feedback and said, hey, we don't think, based off of the way that you're approaching these problems and the way that you've tackled these things, that software development or IT in the traditional sense is going to be a field that you'll be able to prosper at. But we do think that if you go into these other areas of work, you'll get the same sort of satisfaction and use your skills to really help them grow as an individual. And so that sort of feedback, easy or hard, is critical to having a good dialogue.
Well, it's interesting. Scott, our business partner, had a real epiphany. I think it was this week. He was telling me, he's like, Brian, I'd rather have people be honest with me than loyal. And he said, don't get me wrong, being loyal is a good characteristic, but being honest is actually more helpful, because people, when they blindly, loyally follow, they don't voice their opinions and they don't feel heard. So eventually it leads to failure, versus when people are honest, then we at least understand what they're trying to do and can help, right? As soon as they're honest, and I like to joke with people about, are you being honest with yourself, right? A lot of people aren't honest with themselves when they approach problems, or honest with it. Like, how many times you say, I'll do that tomorrow? I mean, are we lying to ourselves? Pretty much, right? Because we know we're not going to do it. And there's a great book, Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, that talks through that. But honesty helps in a lot of ways. We had an employee who still works for us, that when she started working for me here in Maryland, she was honest with me up front. She said, Brian, one of these days I want to move back to Texas. It might be sooner rather than later. And I said, that's fine. Just let me know when that time comes between now and then. Let's just continue to move forward. And she says, well, but clearing me might not be in your best interest. I was like, well, you know what? Let's move forward. Let's do that. And, we'll see what happens. And I said, you've been honest with me. And if it becomes a problem, I'm aware of it and I'll take it. And so, she lived here for, I think, 7 years. And after 7 years, she came to me, she said, Brian, you know what? I've made the decision, I'm going to move back to Texas now. I was like, okay. I wasn't surprised because she was honest with me.
Yep.
Right. And I said, well, how can we help? And she said, well, I don't know. And so we sat down, we put a plan together. We put a plan together where she would stay with Interclips. We put a plan where she would work and find her other job. And we said that we would help her with both of these. And that at the end, she would decide which one worked best for her situation, her family. And so the irony to this was, she would go on interviews and she would use us as a reference. I would talk to these people, and these prospective companies were like shocked. They're like, you're her current boss. You know that she's doing this. Like, yeah, we have a very open relationship. We're being honest with each other about what's going on. It was really, create a very unique situation, and it surprised a lot of people, but it allowed us to help her the best. Right. And the irony is, she ended up staying with us through the situations, everything
still
lined up
now.
And we have a very unique and good relationship. And I hope to form more of those relationships with people because of that honesty. It allows us to just have an open relationship, provide that feedback.
One of the things we'll always say, and it kind of goes to this honesty, is we can't solve problems we don't know about. And so same thing is with having people that are honest versus loyal. If somebody that we work with isn't happy in whatever aspect it is, we can't help them solve that problem, whether that be continuing to work for us, working on a different project, moving to a different company, moving to a different state. If we don't understand the problems and the concerns, nobody's going to be happy at the end. Everybody's going to leave unhappy. So if the problem exists, it's not going to go away. It's just a matter of how we handle it and making sure that it's an approach that everybody will be happy with. And more than likely, if you leave a problem solved in a way that is behooves both individuals in the whatever the dynamic it is, you'll end up longer term, like we've already again talked about with Brian's example of this one individual becoming his project manager, or in this case where we have someone now still working for us just in a different state. It can end up leading to better outcomes than you would have expected otherwise. Kind of the the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, or something like that. I forget the saying, but it's along those lines.
The parts are greater than the whole. There's a question in here. How can we ask those questions if we don't have a good relationship? So I think, communication is my primary tool to build relationships, right? I'm going to say we never start out with good relationships, and that we have to build them. One of my real big things about being honest with people is a lot of times in the workplace, the first time there's a problem, people resign and switch jobs. Okay. And they do that because they're afraid of the confrontation. They're afraid of, honesty. And they don't like that, or they get yelled at. Right. That is an opportunity to create a better relationship. Instead of running from the problem, confront it in a professional manner. Right. And it's an opportunity. Like if someone yells at you, it's an opportunity to mentor them how you want to be treated. It's an opportunity to mentor that culture and have that positive impact on culture. And more importantly, build that relationship, right? I've been married almost 20 years now. And if I said I didn't have a fight with my wife, like I would say I can, tell you that we argue on a weekly basis, right? But, we've continued to grow and build the relationship and the communication. And it takes, problems right? To build those opportunities. And so your work environment, to build good relationships at work, you have to build them. You have to continue. Okay, I see that. Yes, hold on. You have to continue to build them. And it's one of my pet peeves at the work environment is, some of my best, relationships in the workplace started as my worst ones. And I've just fostered those through honesty, feedback, and continuing nurturing those relationships. And honesty is really an important part of building the relationship, is because you'll be surprised what you get when you have an open and honest communication with people. A lot of times they're not going to like you at first. They're really going to be upset about that communication. But when they, think about it, they sleep on it, they come back the next day, they're going to be like, wow, you know what? Julio's the only person that was honest with me about this situation. They're going to come back to you over and over again because they trust you all of a sudden. You've built that. They may not like what you say, but you're the one that's open and honest with them. So that's an important part.
So to talk a little bit more specific for all of you guys, all you people listening, one of the things, and no matter whether it's us or anyone that you're wanting to work with, is you have to meet people where they're at. So one of the things we definitely, our process for engaging with rising professionals such as yourself is through these classes, answering questions and things like that. But then moving through, as you complete the Saturday classes here, the live streams, is going through the incubator, the hands-on portion of this, where you're working with the mentors, and we're starting to build that relationship, like Brian said, and starting to understand and be able to give you feedback, and start to open that conversation and bring in all aspects of that, of building the relationship and communicating as part of that.
I just dropped our emails into chat because people were asking how they can communicate with us.
Oh, okay. I didn't see
I included
your
yours
emails.
Too. It's probably a lag.
No, here, you send it to me in Teams and I'll post it. I don't think YouTube chat lets people put emails or links. We've had this problem before. I think it's probably like a security thing or something like that. Yep. So
I'll send your email to you.
I was curious what email you put. So
I knew that. All right.
Where do we sign up for the incubator / when does it start? So we start inviting individuals who've attended. So this is why the attendance is important. Pat, if you want to paste the attendance in there again, just in case people didn't get it initially. Signing up on there lets us know how many of these you've attended. And so once you've completed 75% of them, roughly, we hand wave some of that.
The dirty little secret is we usually check after 4. And as long as you maintain attendance, we generally invite people.
Yes.
Yeah, email's the best to set up communication with us. I don't mind setting up chat or other mechanisms, but that's the way to enter our communication channel. I don't use, as Julio said, chat or text messages on a daily basis. I think I still have all 999 chats unread here, and 36,000 unread emails. So I still do get flooded. All right, so let's go to the next topic on communication, broadcast. This is like another one of my favorites, and I'm constantly working on my kids with this one and others, but I think it's about managing expectations of both your management, your coworkers, and others, everybody around you. And so what I mean by broadcast is make sure when people need to know something, let them know ahead of time. And, I'll be honest, oftentimes it takes 2 or 3 times. I've learned that when I tell people I'm out, in 2 weeks, everybody forgets about it, right? That's just my first planting of the seed to manage expectations. The following week, I remind them, I'm out next Tuesday is a great example. I'm not around Tuesday. So I remind them the next week. And then Friday, I'm like, hey, another reminder, the third planting of the seed is, hey, remember, I'm not around on Tuesday. And at that point, it hits home. Yes, we're always okay with feedback. Whoops, I just typed in the wrong window. That didn't work really well. Sorry.
So the other thing with broadcasting too is it's the repetition. It's funny. I was on a call with a customer and
visibility.
Yeah, their owner is saying that, hey, you have to tell me something 3 times to really get it to stick. And it's so true. You have to reiterate, especially if it's something that's important to you. Just broadcasting in general can open all sorts of doors. Letting people know that you're interested in something is a great way to get people to hear or to give that to you, is letting them know that, hey, give me feedback. If I say just to give us feedback one time, I mean, you might see it there, but that's all right. And then down the road, you don't. But our culture is very much feedback driven, and getting everyone hears feedback on this process. Again, we're constantly trying to iterate on it. This week now, I'm finally only in front of the camera and not manning the switching. Pat's graciously stepped in to help with that behind the arm behind the camera.
You finally have a professional involved,
yes,
guys.
Yes.
Careful.
And so we're trying to iterate on that, but feedback is always welcome. And broadcasting that is something we try to do constantly, so that people are aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two other points that I'd like to make. I have a great example from just last week, or it might have been this week. I can never keep my time straight. I sent an email to somebody, and I had 2 sentences in the email. One was a quick update status, and the second sentence was what I needed from them. The email I got back was a response to the status, and then they didn't do what I needed. So the clear failure in my communication and my broadcasting was that they only read the first sentence, right? They're really busy, so I knew that. So I sent another email. I waited about a day. I deleted the first sentence. Make sure you send the short and concise, because they're not going to read it, right? I'm kind of famous now. I kind of treat email a little bit more like text messaging. I make my subject like very short and actionable. If I need something from somebody, I put it right in the subject, right? And so I made it very short, what I needed to put in the subject and in the body. And lo and behold, the person did what I wanted that time, right? And so I failed in my initial communication to make it short enough for them to ingest and handle it, right? The second one on broadcast that I like to talk about is if you know somebody needs something, let's just take, let's say your manager's always asking you for a status report every Thursday because they've got to compile a status report on Fridays and they got to send it to their management. Well, you want to get them that status report Wednesday, right? Because you know it's coming, right? So broadcast that status report out ahead of time on Wednesday, okay? Yes, I get it. Doing a status report is not fun, right? And I've bought Julio office space. You're getting that in the next 48 hours somehow. I think they call it the TPS reports in there. Like that was the big joke in Office Space.
Still haven't seen it, so
yeah, so you'll get that
right over my head.
It's the reports they didn't want to do. But my point here is you're going to do it, right? So a lot of the way this generally goes down as a manager is I then have to go. I'm going to use Pat here. He's looking at me like, what did I do, right? Pat, I need a status report by Thursday. Here's how it goes, right? And then Thursday rolls around and Pat's like, man, that's not fun. I'm really, really busy. I'm doing all these other important things Brian's asked me to do. So I go, I see him Thursday. I'm like, Pat, I really need that status report. Yeah, I'll get it to you. And he gets distracted because there's way too many other fun tech things he wants to do. And so Thursday rolls by and Friday rolls in and he hasn't done it and he's forgotten because he's off creating some cool videos and doing some fun stuff for us, right? And then I'm like, oh man. And then I got my manager now, Brian, where's your status report? I'm working on it, right? And so now I've got somebody breathing down my neck. And then I ask for it again. And Pat's like, yeah. I'm like, no, Pat, I really need it. I really like, I need it, Pat. I need it. Like, shake him to get him to do it, right? And by Monday morning, I'll get that status report. And then I send it to my management Monday afternoon. And they're really upset with me because now I've taken a long time to get it to them. And now, who do you think I'm upset with, right? Now I'm really frustrated with Pat because I didn't get that status report, right? But now Pat did the work, right? It wasn't fun. He spent the time. He did the work. He probably did more work because now we've both spent all this time talking about a status report, but he didn't actually get it done. Now, the inverse is, how do you think I look at Pat when Wednesday he does the work, he sends it to me in advance because he knows I need it every Thursday, right? Now he looks great. He looks like the ideal employee. He spent the same hour on it, but now the outcome is completely different. My view of him is better. Now I'm going to go to Julio. I'm going to say, Julio, you need to be more like Pat. Pat gets me a status report on Wednesdays, and I don't even have to ask for it, right? Think about that. Now, there's a more relevant example, right? And I've been working with my kids on this one is like, should you really make your mom upset right before you ask her for something? probably not a good idea.
An even better one is should you do your review and piss off your manager right before your annual raise? We've had people literally that we've told them that the annual review, which is tied to annual raise, and they've gone and not submitted their time card the week before. They didn't submit their review on time, and they just do all of the things that they shouldn't do literally right before their annual review. It's like, should you really piss off your manager who's more than likely being asked by one of their superiors to go and get this done, or it's part of some sort of corporate process or something, right before your review?
I've had that conversation with employees. I'm like, so your review's late. We've worked on this. I've had to ask you numerous times. And, it was really hard doing your raise during that. And they're like, uh-oh. Like, you see that
it doesn't
color
matter.
drain out of their face.
And the unfortunate part is it doesn't matter how great of a job you did the rest of the year. If you go and you try to sell, if I had an employee who didn't do the review or just didn't submit it, and we get there, and I have to then go to my management and ask them, hey, I want to give this person this review. They did a great job this whole year. And they go and they look and say, well, their time card was late and their review is late. Why should we give this person, or it's fresh in their mind right there. And so it becomes a much harder sell to, but the rest of the year was fantastic. It was like, but this time right now, unfortunately, not everyone sees through the potential occasional error, especially right around an important date like that.
Yeah. So the other thing in broadcast is someone's asking in the chat if we use group chats or some sort of communication like Discord. So I'm going to take a general answer on this one in a broader swath. I'll give you some examples and why. I'm
going to just quickly answer and say it just depends.
Well, I'm gonna say from a broadcast standpoint, right? So I prefer our teams use any sort of chat that has the scrolling history and groups so that the entire team can see it and look back in it, right? Because that provides more visibility of the communication. So like at work, we have Skype. And when I Skype with a team, it doesn't save the history beyond like the last, couple hours or whoever's on the chat at that moment. But there's other chat mechanisms at work that we have where you can scroll up and see the prior days of communications and the whole team can see that. And I prefer our teams use those because I'm just going to take an example. Say, you were out yesterday from work. You could come in the following day and just scroll back up the chat and see kind of what happened during the day that you missed without having to go bother Julio or anybody else. There's that extra level of visibility to those kind of chats. I personally, Julio mentioned, I don't have time to go look at chats. Like, I don't even look at chats sent to me most of the time during the day. But it works really well for the team and those teams that are operating and creating those communications. I struggle.
It works really well for asynchronous communication too.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're meeting people where they're at is having sort of history here.
I mean, from my personal struggle, I will go look. Julio and I have a chat. I'll check his chat every day because, him and I are openly working. So we have that dialogue. But I'm in, 500 chat channels at work. I mean, and they're always like blinking. I can't go read every, it doesn't make sense. So what happens is that I've just been trained to ignore all my chats and emails kind of becoming that because there's so many emails. So you'll go to where you can be the most productive.
To answer I think maybe the other part of the question was if we have something like a Discord for everyone here. So when we have people come on board for the incubator, we do use a self-hosted solution called Rocket Chat.
Yep.
It's kind of like a Slack alternative, but we host it ourselves. So once we start inviting people to the incubator, we get you set up on there, and we're on that every day and check that. So we don't use anything like Discord. We thought about it a while ago, but when we did it, we had some other constraints that we wanted to self-host our chat service.
Yeah, and we want to be respectful of people and make sure that we are responding too. So that's why I try to be very clear about the communication mechanisms that I use and Julio uses so that we don't miss people's communications. So we'll switch off a broadcast down to clarity. And this is one where we get to use in the incubator a lot. And I often tell people this is our opportunity to improve our communications. It is often clear when people leave a communication they don't understand. I'm going to give you the first visual cue. If you're talking with somebody face to face, the first visual cue that they give you that they do not understand is when they nod their head.
Just lots of head nods.
The faster their head nods, the less they understand, right? If they look scared and frightened, they have literally not heard a word you've said. And if you don't believe me, here's the simple experiment. And I love doing this at work, at the incubator, is just hand them a marker, go to the whiteboard, say, explain back to me what you're going to do. And you'll be shocked when they can't explain it back to you. Now, when you let someone leave a conversation not knowing what they're going to do, what do you think you're going to get for results? You're not going to get what you want. So it is our job as the communicator to ensure that when they leave, they clearly understand the problem or the opportunity that we've asked them to solve and how to go do that. And so I often love having people write on the whiteboard. I myself am not perfect at this. I remember, it's been about 6 months, but I sent an engineer off to complete a task. 2 weeks later, they come back to me and it was not done in the manner we had discussed. They were a fairly senior engineer. I thought they kind of got it. Well, when I asked them to diagram out on the board the solution, they only got about 10%. So I worked with them. I diagrammed it all out on the board and wrote it down again. Okay. And I asked if they understood. They nodded their head. I said, okay, good. I walked over to the whiteboard and I erased the entire whiteboard. Whoop. And then I asked them to draw it again. And lo and behold, it shocked me. They only drew 25% of the solution. I said, okay. And I went and I did all the rest of the solution out. And then I asked if they understood it again. They nodded their head. I erased the whiteboard. I asked them to draw it again. They drew about 75%. And we went through this exercise until they drew it all out on the whiteboard. And then I asked them to go write that down. Get a piece of paper, write this down. Now, when they went away and came back a week later, they had solved the exact problem that we talked about. And they didn't fail the first time. I failed the first time because I sent them off with a lack of clarity. And you're going to be shocked on a daily basis how unclear things are, right? And there's an interesting thing I've noticed as I've moved up the management chain is for some reason, as you move up the management chain in the hierarchy, the higher you get, the more people are intimidated or scared of you. So when you have conversations with people, a lot of times they just deer in the headlights. They're not even listening. They're just like, oh my God, like, what is he saying? Did I do something wrong? They're terrified that they've done something wrong. So they don't even hear you. And so asking them to repeat back, or a lot of times I'll just go to their management and ask quietly to get something done so that it's not coming from me. But make sure that you haven't had a miscommunication right from the get-go. Because if someone leaves this communication that we're having, you're not going to get the desired result. And so that's the whole importance of clarity. So make sure that everything is clear when you leave the communication.
Yeah, I think, all these things play together. Not one thing is that we've talked about is the sole thing that you have to do to clearly communicate. These are all things that you have to interweave into one another. So talking about the next subject, I know, Brian, this is your favorite one to talk about, is drama. The short answer is keep drama out of the workplace, keep drama out of the communication. It's not going to help at any point in the process at all. If anything, it's just the opposite of all the things we've talked about in that it's not typically honest.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction. Yep, absolutely. It's typically meant to make things unclear and to get rid of clarity. In all reality, it can be, in most workplaces, something that could get you fired. I mean, it's something that if you see in the workplace, run. Doesn't matter how interesting or whatever it is, you want to avoid it like the plague.
Or let your management know so they can, a lot of times they don't know about it, let them know so they can squelch it and just stay away from it.
Yeah.
It's like those hand grenades. It just gets everybody in the vicinity of it, so stay away from it.
Yep.
My wife had a lot of drama at her workplace, and I just implored, I'm like, stay away from it. Don't talk about it. Just, get as far away from it.
Don't perpetuate it. Yeah. Don't.
Yeah. And sure enough, it ended really badly for everybody involved. And luckily she took my advice for once and stayed out of it. So she was away from it, but yeah, be careful.
The other side of things to avoid in communication is negativity. Again, this is when we talk about the ideal worker and all these different attributes to effective communication. The one thing that is paramount to all of those is that negativity is not a part of it. If I go up and, again, managing someone's expectations and saying that, hey, this is going, or empowering someone that, oh, this is a really hard task, but I don't think you can do it. But can you try for like the next hour or two? They're going to spin their wheels and try it for the next hour or two and not get anywhere with it. Making sure that you're not the person bringing down the attitude of the group is just, we can't do this. Oh, this is really hard. Oh, the customer is really bad. Like all those things are going to perpetuate out to the rest of the team, because you're going to make it's really easy. It's really easy to spread negativity. It's really hard to spread positivity. And so if you are the negative person on the team, you're either going to bring down the whole team and eventually be asked to leave from the team if the team's aware of that you're the cause of it. It's never a question. There's always, again, problems or opportunities. It kind of feeds into negativity in a really paramount way, in that if you always view problems as problems and don't see the potential solutions or opportunities in it, it's very easy for everything to look extremely negative. I mean, I get up every day, and what Brian and I have to deal with is problems that are just occurring. Problems in IT. I mean, as a software engineer or a system admin, you're dealing with problems. Something breaks, something needs to be set up. It's about how you respond to it, and really how you ask, how can we do it? It's never, I'm a firm believer there's always a solution to a problem. And so it's not, oh, we can't do this. Oh, it's impossible. It's, all right, well, how do we do this? It might not be the ideal solution, might not be the way that you initially think is the best way, but there's always a way.
And I think negativity is the easy way out. And so like you said, how can we do it? Often that forces you to really think, be creative, come up with an alternate plan or alternate series of plans, or like, well, these things would all have to line up. Okay, how do we make all these things line up? It's hard, right? Yeah. How can we do it is hard.
The path of least resistance is to negativity.
Well, but think of the most rewarding things in your life. They were the hard things. Like you get the happiest right when you solve something that was hard. So like, here's your opportunity to, in a daily basis, how can I do it? Approach the hard problem. Don't take the easy way out. Anybody, literally anybody, can find an excuse, right? They're everywhere. I mean, I've heard them all. We can find them. Like, I'll make a list for you if you want them. But that's in my view, it's a cop out, right? And so, just as a simple example, right? Think of all the people you don't want to be around in your life, or think of the people you run away from. You're like, oh, not that person, right? They're probably a negative person. Think about it. Just think through it, right? Think about when we're at the office place, when everybody like runs from the water cooler when somebody negative comes up. Oh, it's not them. Quick, run. Like everybody's like scatters, right? It's usually a negative person.
Yep.
So think through that. I mean, those are really good examples, but approach, like Julio said, how can we do it, right? That's the hardest question to ask and solve. But if you go in with that mentality, and if you use the word how, right, it takes people's guard down and it makes them want to help. Right? When you use the word why, that puts people on the defensive, because now they're like feeling like they're being questioned, right? Why, Julio? Or what? What is another kind of defensive term? But how invokes Julio and I to want to work together. How can we do this, Julio? Right? Starting with the word how is a simple opening thing. How can we do it? I could be wrong. I don't know how to do it. Oftentimes when you admit that I don't know how to do it, how can we do it? It gets others thinking. Right. And you come up with, I always say, three of us will have a better solution to the problem than any one of us. Right. It's because we want to take the best ideas.
Yeah, I would say that this module, I mean, kind of summing up all of communication before we move on to mentorship, this is definitely a module that when we send the notes out for this should be, I'll say more or less your Bible for the workplace of how to be successful over the long term. It comes down to clear communication, and understanding what other people are saying and how to get your message across and to be understood. The problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are almost always communication problems. And if they're technical problems, those are the good days. The communication problems are the hard ones, and definitely the thing that I say of all of our classes, I think is one of the more important ones.
Yeah, I mean, even from a software development standpoint, right? I love code that's simple. Why? Because simple code clearly communicates what it's doing, right? It's just very simple, right? It's easy to understand. When you make things simple, they're easy to understand, they're easy to move forward. The communication is there. So at the bottom of this module, we have a recommendation to read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Julio referenced that earlier. That book was written in 1936. It's not often that you have a book that's still relevant today. My other note about that book is I like to tell people is listen to the book and the content, but also Dale Carnegie does an amazing job presenting the knowledge, because when you listen or read to that book, you're going to feel almost like, wow, that is so obvious. I can do it. It's easy, right? And he's a good teacher because you leave feeling like you're empowered and you can do the things that they discuss in the book, right? If you've ever, and we got a bunch of college kids here usually, is if you ever sat in that class and you thought the professor was super smart and he made you feel dumb, it's because they're talking over you. They're talking in a language and a method that you don't understand and you don't relate to and you don't feel you can ever learn. And that's not going to help you grow. That's going to, make that professor or the person teaching look smarter. But at the end goal of anything we're ever doing, if we want to teach and we want people to learn, is to make them feel like they can grasp it. And that book is amazing at that. So there's another lesson to be learned in that book, and I like to point that out. We have a second recommendation is Follow Your True Colors to the Work You Love by Carolyn Khalil. And that gets a little bit more into personalities and collaborating with different personality types and how to communicate with different personality types. And I think that's kind of, I'll say, the advanced version of our communication module. When you feel like you've got most of this down, I'd recommend reading that book and starting to leverage some of those skills. First, being able to just identify different characteristics of people so you can identify, their colors and then how to communicate with them. And I will say that book is very powerful. It talks about things that frustrate people. With great power comes responsibility. Please do not use that book to poke at people. I would feel very remiss if I am trying to help you grow and you're using it in a negative way. So please always use it in a positive light.
So moving on to our next subject here, one that is, I'll say, I think our personal favorite is
a little biased.
Definitely biased, is mentorship. And kind of how that fits into your growth as an individual, as an employee, as a leader. It's one of those things that, if adapted to early, can really set yourself up on really long-term success. So going into that, and I'm actually reading through this here, Brian, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So, I mean, I will talk all day. I apologize to you guys. I love mentorship, right? I'm very passionate about mentorship. One of the interesting things, again, we have a lot of college students. So, look at when you study for tests, when you explain to somebody else how to do something, and then they ask that first question, usually you're like, why did you ask that question? I mean, it's usually I'm dumbfounded, right? I remember when I first started mentoring, I would get, the question of like, oh, right. It's because everybody thinks this stuff differently, right? So all of a sudden, when people start asking you questions and you're mentoring, right, all of a sudden you're getting asked all these questions that force you to think completely differently about the problem space, about how to understand things. And so now all of a sudden you're forced by that thinking mechanism to learn, right? And when you have to explain it and answer the questions, you learn at a deeper level. And that learning allows you to grow personally. So I get smarter every time I teach things, every time I do things, I learn from it. I learn from all the questions. I mean, on a daily basis, I love the chat here. I love getting engaged. The more we engage, the more we learn, right? The other thing I like about mentorship, right, is I encourage people to start mentoring right away in their career. Like we wrote cultivation on the Exerceo site, and at the working groups when we do them in person, we're constantly grabbing new people, having them mentor the next new person in there, because it cements that knowledge, but it also starts building, You might be surprised, communication, right? And it starts building the fundamentals of early communication and early leadership skills, right? Because as a leader, you want to grow the people around you, because if you grow within an organization, I'll let you in on a dirty little secret. You're only as successful as your team. So you have to continue to mentor and build the team around you if you want to continue to grow, right? And so that's how I've been successful in my career. I'm not smart, I'm hardworking, but I do something even better is I surround myself with good people, and I keep challenging them to get better. And I keep challenging them to get a good group of people around them and them get better, so that we're all getting better together.
And constantly giving feedback. Again, a lot of these, everything we talk about in all of our classes here, mentorship is kind of the underlying pin between them all, in that encouraging that open and honest communication, encouraging one another to ask questions, to be the mentor or the mentee, and framing it in the context of mentorship enables everyone to be more successful together. Again, you get to learn from the community's challenges and things that they've overcome in the past. It allows me to learn from Brian and understand things that he's tripped over in his career, so that I don't trip over the same things, and vice versa. We're different people in different parts of our lives, and so I've learned things that he has not, and so I'm able to, even though he's been my mentor, I'm also able to mentor him on things.
Constantly.
And the same thing with Pat, is he gets to be our mentor in different aspects, and we get to provide him mentorship in other ways. So mentorship is not unidirectional. It's most certainly bidirectional.
If you're open to it.
If you're open to it.
You gotta be open to it.
Yes, both parties have to be open to the feedback, as well as the willingness to ask for help.
I learn every day. It's amazing.
Yep. One of the really, best places to start with this too, is from a leadership perspective, is the Wikipedia page for servant leadership. It's one of the core tenets that we feel really strongly about, in that as a leader, you're there to help your team and ensure that they're successful. And when you frame this around learning and education, servant leadership is just mentorship at that point.
So the other thing that people often say, well, I don't want to mentor people unless I'm an expert on some topic. I'll be honest, on a daily basis, I solve tons of problems for people, and they're like, Brian, you're the smartest person we ever know, right? I'm really not, right? It honestly goes back to being a good listener. 9 times out of 10, I literally say nothing to the person. I walk up, I say, explain to me the problem. When they explain the problem, by them talking about it, they immediately have figured it out and they know the solution. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's great, I should try this. And then they try something and it solves their problem. I literally said nothing. I was a good listener. And that's how I solve most of the problems. But if that's not the solution, I do solve something, a lot of times I'm not knowledgeable on the topic that I'm helping them with. What I'm knowledgeable on is the thought process to solve the problem. I think, well, if I had a similar problem, how would I go through it? And I walk them through the questions that I would ask myself, right? And I'm teaching them to become a problem solver. I may not know the solution. Oftentimes, I do not know the solution.
And even if you do know the solution, sometimes it doesn't behoove you to tell them the solution. Yep. And especially in a mentor-mentee relationship, it's much better to walk the person through the thought process. Yep. We talk about this all the time when we interview people and we're hiring people. So we don't hire them for what they know. We hire them for what their problem-solving skills are and their ability to learn. And this comes through it, is we want to educate people on how to solve problems, and certainly not to create them. Again, talking about drama and negativity.
If you want problems, just come over here. I'll help you solve them.
Yes, and so having that sort of frame to any engagement that you have is extremely beneficial to your growth and to your overall success.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole teach them to fish concept, right?
Yep.
Is the whole goal that we do in the incubator is really designed to teach people to solve problems, right? They're going to learn some technology, and they're going to learn the foundations, but we want them to be problem solvers. And our goal is to give them the ability to solve those problems.
One of the things that we see really early on too, especially on the engineering side of things, when people are doing software development or system administration or things like that, they get into the, I don't want to mentor. I'm gonna learn all these things and I'm gonna just solve it myself. It's gonna be quicker for me to do it. But eventually the goal, I mean, I think all of our goals is to continue to grow and be successful. And so with that comes more and more work. And so if you want to continue to scale, you, again, like Brian mentioned early on in this section here, is you need to build a team around you, a team that you can trust, and to empower them to go and solve these problems for you. And in order to do that, you need to trust that they can go and solve these problems. So it might take a little bit longer to go and mentor someone, to get them thinking through these thought processes. But in the end, it's
an investment.
It's
You're
very
investing
much
in that team.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you want to be the team of one for life, I mean, you've got to invest.
Yep.
I'll be honest with you. It's really funny is I don't think I've written code now in years. And the funny part is I don't know when I stopped, right? It just slowly happened. The team around me slowly picked up all the responsibilities, and I was slowly solving other problems to the point where I wasn't coding anymore. And I didn't notice it. I didn't make a conscious decision to stop coding. It just naturally happened. And I don't even know when it happened because I didn't even notice it. That's the weird part. And so that happens as you build the team around you. You'll notice the team dynamics shift. And if you're doing a good job, they're taking over more and more of the responsibilities as you can delegate out. That allows you to solve different problems and continue to move forward.
Yep. Just looking at the chat here. Yep. I mean, yeah, some of the best teachers they don't give you the answer. I mean, you probably can look back on some of the better teachers you've had throughout your education and personal and professional lives, is that the ones that you've learned the most from just don't actually give you the answer. I can tell you the answer to plenty of things. You're not going to learn by doing that.
Yeah, I remember, on that lines is, I will keep it brief, but way back in the earlier incubator days, we would meet at Panera Bread at 6 a.m. And one of the incubator candidates called me and said, Brian, I really can't figure this problem out. So we met the following day at 6 a.m. at Panera Bread, and he shows up, and there was something obvious that I didn't expect him to know. So we solved that problem. It was some minuscule remote little setting on his computer that we just don't expect people to solve. So we solved that. And then he showed me the next problem. I was like, all right, well, what do you think you should search to find that? And he searched, and sure enough, up on the search screen shows the first entry was kind of the solution. So I slammed my laptop down, threw it in my bag. I was like, all right, good luck with that. And I walked out. And I remember when I walked out, he gave me this very angry look. Like, how dare you? You just abandoned me in my moment of need. And I just kept on walking. He was so angry at me. And the following day, I get this phone call. I got it. Just, vibrant, excited, the aha moment, right? And I said, yeah, you were pretty angry yesterday. He said, yeah. I said, but how do you feel now? He said, I feel awesome. I was like, see, when you solve it yourself, that's the feeling I wanted you to have. If I had helped you yesterday, you wouldn't have this feeling right now. And that was the aha moment for that person to move forward and have the confidence to be a problem solver on their own. And from that point forward, they really became very independent in solving their own problems. And that was that moment for them. And so that's the moment I look forward to everybody having.
One small subtlety to that story too, that's important, that if you are a mentor, because we firmly believe anybody can be a mentor at any point in their life. I mean, there's always something that you've learned that gives you a unique perspective on something that someone else hasn't. But one of the important things that we find, and Brian alluded to there, is not everything is a mentoring moment. There are a lot of things that are, but sometimes it doesn't make sense that, hey, right now, given the constraints, like Brian said, there's a specific configuration that need to be changed that we just don't expect rising professionals to know. If it's something so complex that it requires like 35 prior,
here's the lesson.
It might not be beneficial to make that a mentoring moment. So there is some sort of gauging to it.
Yeah, choose the right moment. I'll make another plug for Exerceo. Under our website, if you go to the happenings in the news, we've broken up a lot of our insight on our Mentorship 101 guide that's also in the notes today, and posted them out there, because what we found was I think the guide is like 2 or 3 pages long, and the feedback we consistently get is it's too long. So we broke those up into smaller chunks and articles and published them out there so people can have more bite-sized mentorship opportunities.
So with that being said, I think, Brian, that's everything we have to talk about today.
Do we answer all the questions in chat?
I think we got.
Does anybody feel like they still had a question unanswered? Please feel free to paste it in the bottom of the chat again for us.
And I actually do see, I found out what my problem was. I had the wrong drop down on the chat. So I see your chat now, Brian, with the email. So if you guys think of something, feel free to reach out to us. You have our contact info there. We're more than happy to answer any questions. And then, like we said, later on down the road, once we get you in the incubator, we're on chat there, and the other mentors are there to reach, or available for any questions and things like that. So,
yeah, I say go forward and think about problems or opportunities. And then before I see you next, bring back your stories of how you approach the problem differently.
Yep.
And got a positive outcome or a better outcome. Oh, I see something coming in.
I don't.
So we put the
up there.
The
other books. So
the other book was Follow Your True Colors. Let me paste it in here. I'll paste it in. That was the other book we recommend. And if you go through both of those, I would highly recommend going through the Rising Professional Challenge series. What we've tried to do there is minimize the number of books you have to read on a variety of topics to maximize your gain.
Yep. So I just posted the link to the Rising Professional Challenge series. So that's a lot of the Professional Challenge series. There's a lot of reading involved in that. There's some things that are activities, but there are a lot more of these books in there that we would definitely recommend, that all have ancillary pieces of knowledge that you can tie to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, we tried to boil down our 300 Audible books into the
most useful,
quickest and easiest knowledge ones.
Best ROI.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the challenge series was designed around. So I'd march through those books. If you march through all of the challenge series, feel free to ping us. We have further readings. That's where we kind of get into our custom mentorship programs and really try to help people customize and head down the path that they want to head down.
All right. Well, I think that's all we got for today. So yeah, definitely make sure to give us a subscribe. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the one we post on a lot. So thank you everyone for being here today, and we'll talk to you 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Be safe.